Hello, 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 everyone. Happy Wednesday. I believe it is Wednesday. That's what my computer's telling me. So, welcome. I'm Claire Jones. I'm a queer fantasy romance author, as well as a small publisher that supports other writers in getting their works shared with the world. And we are jumping on for my Marketing as Authors Facebook Live series, where I interview the amazing and inspiring authors in my network to discuss the marketing strategies that have propelled our writing careers forward in meaningful ways. So if you're joining us, please like, comment, share below, and let us know that you're here. And today I'm talking to Brian.
Yay! Huzzah!
Yeah, yeah, a connection
Hey,
of a connection, and we're finally here.
exactly. And thank you for having me. Thank you very much, and thank you for to Aaron Casey for recommending us to each other.
Yes, yes, us authors need to stick together, honestly.
Amen.
Well, first, let's get a rundown of your books. What are they? How many have you written? And what's coming up next?
Okay, well, I'll go into my usual spiel because everyone should have one. I'm Brian K. Morris, independent publisher, freelance editor of comic books and of prose, um, Facebook famous YouTuber, and former mortician's assistant. I've got um, about 11 books out right now. Well, actually, 10
Awesome.
because one's still in production hell, and the other 10, one's a nonfiction, but everything else is pretty much pulp style adventure, action
Hmm.
adventure. Most of it with a little bit of a twist. My best-selling book is called Santastein, or the post-holiday Prometheus. And it is a takeoff, obviously, of the Mary Shelley book, and we put on the cover filled with much inappropriate humor. Because
Hmm.
I tell people the Federal Trade Commission makes us do that.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I'm also in about 3 dozen different anthologies, everything from romance to westerns to,
Wow.
again, action adventure. Pretty much call me, give me a word count and a deadline, and I'm probably yours. So,
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I'm getting strong 80s vibes.
oh yeah, oh yeah. People can't really tell how old I am because I go by an old description of Willie Nelson that he's a 68-year-old man, doesn't look a day over 75. But my interest in pop culture goes back into like 2 previous centuries.
Oh,
And I'm right on that edge, being a boomer. I'm right on that edge of remembering when TV was a novelty.
oh,
And you bought
yes.
a TV and people look for excuses to come to your house to watch all the pictures move inside this box. So,
Hmm.
I've seen quite a bit, and some of it manages to work its way, pop culture things and technological things, into a lot of my work. So,
Yeah, I think the pulpy adjective that you used earlier is really apt for the brand vibe that you've got going on here.
yeah, thank you, because I love pulps. I grew up on like the reprints of the old Doc Savage and
Hmm.
Shadow,
Hmm.
and fell in love with kind of that fast paced style of storytelling, which kind of morphed into my teen years, where I got into the '70s paperback series, like
Wow.
the action adventures, like anytime you could find um, like a verb, you made it the character, like the executioner, the destroyer, the penetrator, the
Yeah,
chameleon, things like
yeah,
that. So,
yeah.
but is that and I got to meet a couple of the writers of that stuff,
Hmm.
which really, at a time when I'm trying to figure out what I'm trying to do as a writer, um, it was very helpful. They were very encouraging, which I try to be myself, because a lot of us get so many favors from people who don't have to do it,
Oh, yeah,
who don't have to
absolutely.
share the information. And the only way I can pay them back is to give this information to someone else who needs help, which is why I've called my operation since 2015 Rising Tide,
Yep.
because it raises all ships.
I introduced someone to that phrase the other day and they were flabbergasted. And I was like, how have you never heard this phrase before?
Yeah, yeah. It's like, I remember, I grew up during the Kennedy administration, but there was a period in 2015 where I was mulling over how I had gotten as far as I had, and I
Mm,
kept running across that phrase,
yeah.
and usually attributed to President John F. Kennedy. And I'm thinking, like Bruce Wayne sitting in a study. When the bat flies in your window, you take it as an omen.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, all of your references just remind me like not only of like pulpy science fiction, like I'm thinking like
mhm.
Weird Science from the
Oh
80s and stuff like
yes,
that,
love
but I'm
that show.
also thinking like very strong superhero, like
Mhm.
the Ant-Man and the Giant Woman and like those kinds of as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Comic books were a huge influence on me, still are, because that's where I learned to read. That and
Mm,
cereal boxes.
mm,
And as time went on, I also had, when I was very young, we had a line of comics called Classics Illustrated, where
mm.
you could read classics in comic book form. And I still read comics to this day, and in fact, I find a lot of what I do, like this is a recent release from last year. The Terror is based on a Golden Age character. It's in the public domain, but we
Hmm.
race swapped him to
Mm.
add the idea of, a lot of these guys had very few challenges
Yeah.
aside from the villain of the month. But
Yeah.
what if, like the Black Terror? What if he actually was African American? And then it got me to thinking, it'd be kind of silly for like Superman to call himself the White Superman. It's
Yeah.
that opens up all kinds of doors we don't want to investigate. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, we were talking about this in the last episode about how there's been a recent increase of morally gray heroes and morally
hmm,
gray villains, but
yes,
you're kind of the era where there wasn't a lot of morally gray going on. They're
oh
either
no,
heroes or villains. There's a lot of dichotomy there.
yeah, and I think that, well, at least for most of my adult life, because again, I grew up in the Watergate era,
Hmm.
and now considering where we're at now,
Yeah.
what's wrong with having heroes? What's wrong with having
Mm,
people who do it simply because they have been gifted something and it's the
mm,
right thing to do? I
mm.
don't I don't see any problem with that. I don't exactly lose sleep worrying about that sort of thing. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, we were talking about it in terms of like morally gray tends to be a little more relatable for the average human.
well, sure,
So,
yeah.
how do you make true heroes relatable in your work?
In my case, it is the Stan Lee method of Marvel, where you do
Mm,
give them feet of clay, and they will take a moment and weigh whether it is more expedient to, like, say, push them over the cliff
ah,
rather than to save them for the law. I like the idea of heroes that have, I won't call it feet of clay. I mean,
mm,
my characters tend to have strong moral compasses. My
mm-hmm,
antagonists do, but I do want them to wrestle with, you know, other issues. I want them to wrestle with what they do, whether it would be simpler to just plug your ears and ignore the situation, or go out and try to do something about it simply because you're either the best person to
mm,
deal with it, or if nothing else, you're the closest.
mm.
And I always admire those people that we heard a lot about in 2001, that the real heroes, while everyone's running away from the explosion,
Mm,
the heroes are running toward it.
mm. Yeah, so there's no doubt that they are the hero. There's no doubt in their moral compass, but
Yeah.
the doubt may come in with how the thing is accomplished.
Right. And whether they can actually do it, whether
Mm,
this might be above their power level, above their
mm.
ability to influence. I'm writing a sequel to this right now, mostly because a lot of, no, I won't say a lot, but a few people have taken me to task for turning a former white character into an African
Sure.
American.
Yeah,
And
that's been
every time,
happening a lot.
yeah, and I thought the only way to, because I'm petty at heart, but I thought if the only way to get back at them is to use, like, the free enterprise system and make more of the stuff that would torque them off in the first place.
Mm,
So I've got an extra short story. I've started another short story, and we've started the second draft of our next novel, where the hero is going to face the heroes, I should say, because there's three of
mm,
them that we deal with here.
mm,
But all three are going to deal with a an enemy that is so far above them in the power level
mm,
that his victory is all but assured
mm.
unless these guys push back as hard as they can. So
Yeah,
that's the sort of
interesting.
that's the sort of thing I like also to explore is cutting off the protagonist rather, from their support system
Yes.
to where at the end it is them and their wits. And basically, they may use a power, they may use something on hand that, of course, with the Henrik Ibsen thing, you have foreshadowed that they will use that to save the day,
Mm.
for the right reasons. So that's pretty much most of my fiction in a nutshell.
Yeah, I once heard the phrase, the enemy of tension is knowledge.
Yes, yes,
And that's something that I've intentionally worked into how I build tension, narrative tension in
right.
what I write. Because if you know all of the pieces, then there's no suspense, right?
Yeah, I get
And I,
that.
and I think that's my issue ultimately with the omniscient narrator.
Oh, yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
Because unless the omniscient narrator is an unreliable omniscient narrator,
Yeah. Yes, yes.
then you already know everything that's happening.
That's true. But I one of my favorite writers currently is Stephen Moffat, who was the script runner for Doctor Who a
Mm,
few doctors ago,
mm,
and he's of this type of writer that I really enjoy, where like in the playwriting example of Henrik Ibsen, where if you have a gun in Act Three, you better show somebody putting it in their pocket in Act One.
mm.
I will do something like just a casual mention. Yeah, he put the handkerchief in his left pocket, and then at the very end, oh, he remembered the handkerchief in his pocket, sort of
Yeah,
thing,
yeah.
where it rewards the reader for paying attention. And if they
Hmm.
didn't pay attention, they'll go, "Oh, I remember that now." Kind of like an Easter egg. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've heard it of the rule of threes. Something
mhm.
is more believable down the road if it's been mentioned at least twice
Exactly.
previous to that. And I
Hmm.
think that that's very important, especially when we get into the realm of superheroes and fantasy and
Oh
sci-fi,
yeah.
because you can come up with such unbelievable plot solutions with
Yes. Yes.
environments. And the
Uh-huh.
Deus Ex Machina is something that we try to avoid at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, a really good guide that I use for my writing is the Lester Dent master plot. He was the guy who created Doc Savage for the
Mm,
Popes in the 30s. And in it, he talks about the climax should be from the hero's intelligence, that he doesn't like call in something from, off camera to
yeah,
use at the
yeah,
very last second, or this used to be in comics called the Green Arrow syndrome. I need a left-handed boxing glove arrow. Well, I just happen to have one
yeah,
right here, and
yeah,
you've never
yeah,
seen it before, but here it
yeah,
is. So,
yeah, exactly. That's how I feel
yeah.
about time magic. I feel like time magic ruins so much.
Oh yes, yeah. I think that's why I've stayed away from fantasy for so long, as far
Yeah,
as writing it.
yeah. Well, let's back up a little bit and talk about what led you to this writing career. Did your past experiences support your journey, or was it completely out of left field?
Yeah, it's funny because I was thinking a while back that my journey started in seventh grade, where I gave the usual boring Christmas, back
Mm,
after Christmas vacation back in school, and I'd already shown an aptitude for writing, so I gave
mm,
my thing first, and I hoped I described the tree being lit up. Well,
mm.
somehow through an awkward phrasing, I made it sound like my teetotaling parents were lit up, and I heard it from my teachers, and then the teacher ratted on me. So then I heard it for the rest of the evening when I got home, and I thought I better do this communication thing a little more skillfully in the future. But I started thinking, what led to that point?
Mm,
And I go back to about 3 years old when my mother taught me to read
yeah.
from comic books and cereal boxes, because I wanted to know why she picked corn checks and dad picked Kellogg's cornflakes, aside
Mm,
from that rooster that was on the cornflakes at the time. And she explained those are words like you're talking, but this is the visual form of them. And I asked her to teach me to read. So reading comic books from that point on, I was the only kid in first grade that knew the word invulnerable and could
right,
spell it.
right.
And then later on, as I'm studying comic books and how they're constructed, as
Mm-hmm.
well as and making up these stories for my imaginary friends because I lived out in the country and I didn't really have any playmates at the time. Then I
Mm.
moved into the city for school, and my mother informed me one day that you realize they pay people to put those words in the comic balloons.
Mm.
You talk about life changing information. That was it. And for many years, I did try to break into the comics field.
Mm-hmm.
Um, with varying degrees of getting close, but
Yeah.
but eventually I settled into writing articles, and I was a
Mm.
playwright for a number of years. Hey,
Mm.
folks, if you really want to lose money as a writer, go into playwriting.
Yeah, right.
Oh, I've got some horror stories. But and then I moved into I was doing interview transcriptions for comic and pop culture magazines, which
Mm.
led to one of the editors saying, "I like your emails. Write me some articles." And so I started selling
Interesting.
articles and parlaying my credits as I went,
Mm.
including a playwriting credit I had gotten for my very first play on the opening night, where unbeknownst to me, the director had stepped in for an actor that had ghosted the cast on the last week of rehearsal.
Wow.
And on stage, the guy skipped 3 pages of my script.
Uh.
And he thought I was going to kill him. And the fact was, I was so nervous that one, I left a sweaty palm print on my wife's jeans with my hand, and secondly, I told him I wrote and I didn't notice, so I think you're okay. So they gave me a little award for not murdering the guy. And so
Excellent.
so on my resume for years it said award-winning in quotes playwright.
I love that.
In the 25 years since I've started using that, I've only had three people that asked me why it's in quotes, none of whom were publishers, none were editors, none were writers.
Oh, I love that.
They're all readers, but that's how work my way up to where I am
No,
now.
I think that's brilliant. I remember, wasn't it like person of the year? Was it back in like 2016 where it was like everyone or you or like me
Yes,
or whatever, and
yes,
people started
yeah,
putting on their resume like 2016 Time Person of the Year, right?
yes, yeah.
Like, I think that that's a brilliant creative way to convey unconventional skill sets
That's
in a
me.
way that can be attractive, especially if you're going into a more creative field. Like if you're
Right.
going to be a doctor or a lawyer, they're not really concerned about your creativity at the end of the day.
That's true.
But, writing at magazines, going into
Mm-hmm.
publishing, so on and so forth,
Mm-hmm.
even office jobs that require creativity, I
Oh
think
yeah.
that's brilliant.
Thank you. And you talk about pivotal events. I'll go into my very brief anti-corporate rant. I used to work for a water utility, and somebody in our home office made a percentage of a point miscalculation in our stock exchange,
Oh,
like
wow.
down the road, to fund different projects,
Yeah.
infrastructure projects. And so they let me and about 25 other people in the state of Illinois go to make up for the difference.
Wow.
And by then I'm selling stuff. And I remember I tell people I was looking at this clock on the wall and I watched the sweep hand go around. By the time it reached 12, I realized, why am I worried? I've
Mm.
got my plan B.
Mm.
And the reemployment agency that was part of my severance package, teaching you how to interview better, write better
Sure.
resumes. Um, they had a one-time webinar on electronic publishing.
Hmm.
And my advisor said, I already signed you up for it.
Huh.
And because I had taken a test and it came out that my aptitude to being a writer was 97%.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
following the trend there, I was
Uh-huh.
relieved to hear that. But I took this course, and all I saw were possibilities,
Yeah.
that no more gatekeepers. Now,
Mm.
traditional publishing has its place. I
Yeah.
will not poo poo it for that. And there are pros and cons to either one. But I think this levels the playing field for creatives,
Absolutely.
that if you if you don't want to do it, you can hire somebody who can do it. Um, you have the same opportunities as someone in the conventional publishing field. And I know authors, and I know of authors who are doing 5, 6, and even 7 figures a
Yeah.
year, if that's your barometer of
Yeah.
success. That the possibility, the potential is there. And if you are as anal and a control freak as I have learned I am, then you, you have a chance to sculpt a book that looks exactly as you would want it to be,
Mm-hmm.
which is real. I have been published by others,
Mm-hmm.
like the this brand new one from Flinch Books, hashtag always promote. Uh, this is from another publisher, and they asked me to do that, and God bless my friends there. But it's that has my self publishing has led to that.
Mm.
People ask me, well, where's your calling card? I said, my calling card's right here.
Mm.
Here's my business card. That's how you can tell I can do the work.
Yeah.
And I glory in the idea that I am a hack. Because I'm the guy that when somebody blows a deadline, I'm the guy they call.
Yeah.
Because they know I will get the job done. I will get the job done on time. I will bring a certain level of competency to it. Then after someone blows their deadline 2 or 3 times, they just save a lot. The editors save a lot of time, and they just call me directly.
Yeah.
So
I honestly believe that creatives are the most primed to succeed in general.
I agree.
If you can approach each situation, each decision, each opportunity with your creative drive.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And especially since we're talking about promotion, that you can make your creativity work for you there.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Well, that segues great into the next question of what have you been able to achieve with this career?
Well, I can afford my comic books every month. That's kind of cool. so, but several things have happened. I've been doing this full time now for 12 years, and I revel in the fact that there are writers in my fields that I absolutely fanboy over.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I get to sit at the same table with them at dinner.
Yeah.
I get to hang out with these guys, and that just thrills me, to a degree that cannot be quantified. And it's something I've wanted to do all my life. I have wanted to be a writer. I've always wanted to be in the creative field, and this satisfies all my urges for that. Plus, I mentioned my little stained plywood award for not murdering someone. I actually got an award a couple of years ago for a short story I wrote.
Awesome.
Oh, thank you. I'm sitting there waiting for like Ashton Kutcher to come out, and tell me I've been punked or whatever. But yeah, there's been a lot of very gratifying things that have happened. I have made many of the best friends, like we mentioned, Erin Casey. She's a very close friend. A lot of people in my Rising Tide group that, if I ever have a problem, they're a phone call away or an email away. It's just a lot of the bonding that we have done with each other over this thing that we do, and it's I cannot begin to describe how satisfying this thing is. It really is.
I love that your definition of success is satisfaction, but not necessarily monetary satisfaction, which in our capitalist world we hear way too often. So how has this goal of, I guess, internal personal satisfaction informed the way that you approach your business?
It makes me want to do more of it. And in order to do more of it, I have to get better at my job. And for all the satisfaction I get out of this, I treat my publishing as a job. But as I tell people, it doesn't matter if you're working for someone else or working for yourself, the boss is still a jerk. And so, I make mistakes. I think one advantage of self-publishing is I'm able to bounce back from them a lot more easier. I don't have to consult with a whole lot of people. I've got more control, as I mentioned. And I'm not going to turn down the money for but I treat the whole thing as a job. I've been in the 9 to 5 world. I have held a variety of jobs, both at the lowest level up to managerial, and even the managers have to clean out the restrooms at night. There are parts of this you will not have fun doing.
Yeah.
But if you want people to know what you are doing as far as being creative, and this isn't just writing, this is film, this is, any sort of art, any sort of creative endeavor. If you don't tell people you're doing it, how are they going to learn? And the thing is, I heard uh, a, a statistic recently and it was a poll. It was taken with a goodly number of people, that of every 100 people that said, I want to write a book, 83% started, which
Okay.
is not bad.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Here's where it gets dark. Of that 83%, 6% get halfway through.
Oh, okay.
And then of that 6%, only 3% finish. And that, I understand it. I mean, I did a show last night where we talked about when the energy runs out, about
Mm,
halfway through.
yep.
And you have to motivate yourself to get to the end. And that's when this starts becoming a job, although you keep your eyes on the goal.
Yeah.
And promotion will help this, because you want people to be as enthused about your stuff as you are, and you are your best salesperson. But you
Mm,
but you want to make it to that goal, because and I'll probably get an amen from you on this one. When you get your first box of the
mm,
physical book and you open that up and hear all these beautiful shiny covers with
yeah.
your name on the front, huh?
It's a good feeling. It's a very
It's
good
a
feeling.
And I still get that feeling on reorders.
Yeah,
You
same
know,
here. Every time I just have a pile over there, and every time I look at, I'm like, look at that
yeah.
pile.
Oh my goodness, yes. Oh, it's like this is one of those feelings that you almost wish you could bottle and give to other creatives. Say, hey, you're running out of energy. Take a whiff of this,
Yeah,
and you will sprint to the finish line.
yeah,
It's that, again, it's that satisfaction that you have done something that a lot of people talk about and they do not finish. I mean, when I was in college, I wrote a novel that,
mm,
um, when I moved from Illinois to Indiana, I made sure that that book was totally destroyed, because there was like no redeeming quality to it whatsoever.
mm.
And I'd rather have found myself in a sex tape than with this thing in my possession. So I made sure it went away. But still, I'd done it.
Yeah,
I'd written a draft. It was a god awful book, and I'm glad to see it dead. But it showed me I could do it. Now, it
mm,
took me a number of decades to figure out all the moving parts to create a book that I wanted to read.
mm.
And it was a lot of little things, and a lot of, well, should I go in this direction with my writing? Should I go in this direction? And, finally at the age of 55, I, put the pedal to the metal, and I did a book for the late limited Kindle Worlds program, which was basically
Wow.
paid fan fiction.
Yeah.
And I wrote a book about Bloodshot, who was a Valiant Comics character I really enjoyed. And for the next 3 years, that book was in their top 50
Wow.
constantly, and that was so cool, so
We all
cool.
love some good fan fiction, honestly. It makes
Oh
the world
yeah,
go around.
oh yeah. Well, and we, and a lot in the sense, since I like to plumb the public domain a lot, for
Yeah.
inspiration, um, there's nothing wrong with doing your own pastiche of, these established characters. And in fact, if you
Yeah.
go back and look at the history, Superman is a combination of elements from about half a dozen um, different things, like Buck Rogers, the
Mm,
Phantom, the Scarlet Pimpernel,
mm,
Buck Rogers,
mm.
and Batman is basically Superman, but as a human being.
Yeah.
And how do we flip that around? So,
Yeah.
I constantly say we stand on the shoulders of titans. So,
Oh yeah, I mean the public domain is there for a reason.
well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's why every January 1st, I excitedly uh, check with this one. I think it's Yale has a beautiful page on the public domain, and
Mm.
I go down the list of everything that's now in my playground. So,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, culture is such a reciprocal process.
mhm.
I studied art history in college, and I used
Ah,
to tell people that I'm not studying art, I'm studying culture, and I'm
yes,
studying the psychology of culture as well. Because
yes.
art informs culture and culture informs art. And
Hmm.
so you can take an art piece out of any culture and be able to tell you what the ethos of that culture is, what the
Yeah,
apology of that culture is.
I took music appreciation during college one summer for the very same reason.
Mm,
And it was also, for me, it was interesting to see how the musical styles, um, like you had one, then the successor, it lasted this long on the time scale. Then the next one lasted this one. The next one lasted this one until you get to like the 60s where it's just like it lasted this long. And
yeah,
now it's like every 20 minutes we've got a
yeah,
new type of musical culture. But how
yeah,
it reflected technology, how it
yeah.
reflected events, and people don't always understand the relationship between what's going on in the real world and other art forms. And I use music, in fact, as a springboard for ideas
Absolutely. Same
sometimes.
here.
Yeah.
I make
Yeah.
playlists for my books,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
like that's how I get into character
Yeah.
perspectives.
Or sometimes I'll use it for just getting into the mindset of something I want to write. Like if I'm doing
Yeah.
horror, I my mantra is in Penny Lane. There's a barber showing photographs of every head he's had the pleasure to know, and
Mm-hmm.
he still has most of them.
Mm-hmm.
I've
Mm-hmm.
ruined so many people's childhoods with that line. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, music is a huge source of inspiration for
hmm.
me. It's where I get character personalities from,
Yeah.
tropes from,
Hmm. Hmm.
point of views
Yeah.
from. And so I actually make like, it's usually 5 to 6 songs per book. I make like a set playlist of like what the emotional arcs
Oh,
are for the
sweet.
plot as
Yeah.
well. And it like
Yeah.
progresses as the playlist progresses.
Uh
And
huh.
that's one of my most listened playlists is like the progression of those emotional arcs. And so
That's
Spotify
awesome.
thinks I'm a hopeless romantic at the end of the day.
I love it. I love it. That's
Yeah.
brilliant.
Well, I wanted to go back to something you said earlier when it comes to marketing as you're writing the book,
Yes.
because now we're getting into the point of the podcast where we're talking about practical, like how did you actually approach the marketing aspects? And
Hmm.
I think it was fascinating that you said that as a way to encourage you to finish the
Hmm.
book.
Yeah.
And I think that's fascinating because so many people don't tell anyone about the book that they're writing until after it's finished, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I'm wondering if more people would be motivated to finish the book if they tell people about it as they're writing it.
I think you're right, Claire. Because it's kind of like when you go. I've heard it said that like when you go on a diet, you tell everyone you're going on a diet because then you're accountable for it.
Yes, exactly.
And accountability is something I think we all can use, and I'll raise my hand as being part of it. But yeah, I mention it everywhere I can on my Facebook page. I do, like I said, a lot of broadcasting on YouTube and areas like that. I have a Patreon page where I do a twice weekly blog, and and occasionally I will say, here is my list of things I want to work on this year, and there's about 2 dozen items long, and it rarely shrinks because I find something new
Of
to
course.
work
Of
on.
course.
Yeah, but I will give a tip here that I launched the Terrors hashtag always promoting that I had talked about for 2 years while I was writing it. It was
Mm,
basically an experiment in strengthening my first drafts,
mm,
so that I wouldn't have to spend as much time writing later on. And
mm.
it's really turned into a good time saver for me now that I've internalized a lot of
Interesting.
the lessons I've learned. But by then, when I'm telling other people about this and mentioning it on YouTube and mentioning it on my pages on Facebook and other media, and now I'm getting into TikTok again
Mm,
now, um, that people are hearing this over and over and over. I think it's called sequential pattern recognition.
yeah.
That in advertising, like if you hear about Comet Sink Cleanser and you hear about Comet Sink Cleanser, And when you go to the store and I need a sink cleanser, what do I get? Well, there's Joe Schmo,
Yep.
there's Camel. No, wait, there's Comet. I'll grab that because it's familiar to you.
Yep.
And I had and I hear this wisdom because I think it varies. To fool the algorithms, you do like this 3-month long pre-launch where you're giving out samples. You're
Sure.
going on all the blogs. You're going on all the shows. You're you know to the point where people are like, oh God, it's him again, sort of thing. I launched this almost very quietly. I said, here's the release date.
Mm.
Here's what here's my progress on it, which I point towards my Patreon if anyone wants to sign up for that.
Mm.
And then I release it, and it's the strongest release I've ever had.
But you were
People were
talking
already
about
primed
it.
for it.
But you were talking about all while you were writing it too.
Exactly. Yes. I'm very transparent about what I'm working on at that time. And this goes back to just a good place to start is just mention it on your social media, because everyone who's watching this right now is on some sort of platform, and it doesn't matter if it's Instagram or YouTube.
Yeah.
And and I know and we'll talk doing this on a limited budget, let's call it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, just mention it, because yes, a lot of the platforms now suppress a lot of our messages because we're not paying to get them out there.
Yes.
And in fact, they'll ding us for it. But you know what? If I've got, say, 2,000 people or 2,500 people in my personal thing, and it only gives me 1% of them, it's still getting out.
Yeah.
And you ask people to share. And if you build a community, become part of the community where you say, hey, I've got this thing. I'm really proud of it. I'd really like y'all to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And they share your message, which amplifies your voice, which is why like we talk about people that don't talk about their work, or the people you go to a show and they've got all the books and the displays set up, and there's this tiny little window. You see the author kind of looking around like one of those tiny little birds that you think their heart is going to explode if you make eye contact with them.
Yeah.
And, the thing is, like I said, finishing a project puts you in some pretty thin air.
Yes.
And you should be proud of it. You should be telling everyone that won't slow down, won't speed up when they see you. You should be telling them, hey, I'm really proud. I wrote this book. I'm really proud of it. I'd love it if you took a look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get your community, your tribe, whatever you want to call it, and you start posting, they'll go, hey, that's my buddy. I better, like since we got to know each other, I've been sharing your stuff, because I like what you do.
Yeah.
And I share Aaron's all the time. I share another friend that's got a Kickstarter for his very first book. Shout out to Brian Rodman. He got a little edit from me, and he survived the process, so he's good.
Congratulations.
Yeah. I edited a 3,500 page book a couple years ago, and it wound up being 5,500 after I put in my comments. So
wow.
I'm both my parents were teachers, so I'm afraid I got that gene in me. But no, it's like one thing. Like I said, you don't have to spend a lot of money on it, but also if you have a strength, like I have done acting. As you notice, I dress a little provocative. And I get people asking me if I'm a Shriner. No, but I get people saying Fezes are cool. I know the Doctor Who fans then, so we have something to talk about. And people will buy books from you if they like you, because they want to support you. They support what you do. And I don't mind making a little bit of a spectacle of myself, a little bit flamboyant, if it brings people over to check out what the hell's wrong with me. And and I sold books because I can explain the difference between trademark and copyright and not put you to sleep.
Yeah. And
it's just figure out a platform, figure out your strengths, and then take the next step and go outside of your comfort zone. I mean, for all that you see here, I'm an introvert. Like,
same.
Just about see, I'm preaching to the choir here.
This is on Claire. Off Claire happens after we turn off the camera.
I call it me, but not me.
Yeah.
He shares my, it's like the Doctor. He shares my memories, but it's not quite the same person.
Yeah.
And I will go to a show and I will spend the next 24 to 48 hours recovering from peopling.
Yes,
But I
absolutely.
love going out and meeting people and everything and talking about this stuff. But yeah, there's so many things. Find the free avenues because um, it's better than doing no promotion at all. And
Yeah.
then once you start to get a little money in, and you change your mindset, I'm big on mindset, that you don't think of it as expense.
Mm,
It's an investment in your business.
mm.
And so you take out a Facebook ad, you take out an Amazon ad, you spend a little bit of money. You go to Fiverr. Right now, I'm playing around with Fiverr
Yeah.
to see what they can do for me, see if we can
Yeah.
move the needle a little.
Yeah, this is
You know,
really
it,
interesting. Like, I
yeah.
feel I've recently come across the term breadcrumbing.
Yes, yes,
And I think that authors, writers have to breadcrumb their audiences with pieces of themselves,
yes, yes.
you know, and you have to, as an author, decide what pieces you're willing to breadcrumb with and what pieces
Mm-hmm.
you're comfortable breadcrumbing with.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then, because like you said, use what your strengths, but then go into your uncomfortable zone, your discomfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
But you start from that foundation of strength.
Right.
So I think that makes the discomfort zone a little more tolerable if you
I agree.
start from somewhere that you're okay with exposing.
Right. And I agree with you completely, Claire. And the idea that, you do personal shows. I do a lot of personal shows because it's a great way to meet new people.
Hmm.
And invariably, I'll sell some things for the next 48 hours on Amazon after most shows. So you're
Hmm.
planting the seeds there. The thing is, I'm not comfortable going out and for 4 to 10 hours a day putting myself out trying to figure out who wants to talk to me, who doesn't, saying hello to
Hmm.
everybody, having
Hmm.
conversations with total strangers,
Hmm.
and then trying to recover from all that. And I have found that where I live, there are not many personal appearance opportunities.
Ah.
So I had to throw my net a little bit wider and
Hmm.
wider and wider. To that end, I bought a van a couple of
Mm.
years ago, and I have the back decked out. And my friends in law enforcement keep giving me warnings about this. I have a bed in the back. I can sleep in that thing from freezing to up to 75,
Mm.
and it's a mobile motel. And I have saved so much money on hotels, on
Yeah.
lodging that way. And I love the thing. We call it Calgon, as in Calgon, take me away, because we use it for road trips too. But it's just figuring out if the opportunities are not near you, how far are you willing to drive? I have gotten up in the middle of the night to drive somewhere
Mm.
for a show. I have more than once. My wife gets up early because she has like a normal job, but she has to get up like at 4 o'clock. I've
Mm.
had times where I will get in the door and fully clothed, I will just lie beside her so that she can wake up next to me
Mm.
and she knows I'm safe.
Mm.
So, it's I find it's the people who push, the people who will do what they can and more,
Yeah.
who will succeed in this business. And I'm not trying to make it sound like it's an endurance contest by any
Sure, sure.
any stretch, but you
I
see the
mean,
people who succeed are the folks who can step outside of themselves and their egos and sometimes their physical abilities to
mm.
get to where the audience is.
And I think it's being creative with resources. I mean,
Exactly. Yeah.
my mind is even going back to your award-winning resume
Yes.
because that was a resource that was gifted to you, maybe
Mhm.
as a joke, right?
Right.
But you
Right.
use the resource to its full capacity
Mhm.
by putting it on your resume. You're
Yeah.
using your van to its full capacity by using it as a mobile motel for yourself.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of growth and success and accomplishment can be found when you use resources to their full capacity.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, in fact, everybody has banners now. But
Mm,
before I could afford a banner, I went to like the local art supply store. I bought one of those big 2 by 3 foot foam things with the shiny front, and I got the
mm-hmm,
stick on lettering and little stick on stars,
mm-hmm,
and made little printed out copies of my book covers and put them on there, and it's this big, gaudy
Yeah.
display. It looks
Almost
like
like a science fair project.
it does. It looks like the history of helium sort of
Yeah.
thing. And I
Yeah.
still run a picture across a picture of this whole thing,
Which is
and I love
endearing.
it.
I mean, if that's part of your brand presence too, you can chalk up to that endearing factor as well.
It was, and I like to think that in the 12 years I have done this, if nothing else, I have shown that it can be done.
Yeah.
That your only limitations are um, basically your creativity and what you are willing to do ethically
Mm.
to move up the ladder. And one thing I think helps is there's a great book by J. Michael Straczynski called Becoming a Writer, Staying a Writer, where he talks about as you're climbing the ladder, you should always have one hand behind you pulling people up.
Oh yeah.
If nothing else, it helps write out your karma, if nothing else.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, because there's a lot of stuff, and I also come from the generation of guerrilla marketing
Oh, sure. Yeah.
where it's like it's all up here if you don't have the resources to spend like too much money on
Yeah.
any sort of shotgun style advertising. And nowadays you can actually pinpoint a lot of your advertising, especially on social media,
Man, yeah.
exactly to the people who need to hear your
It's so
message.
sophisticated. It's so sophisticated. If you know
Yeah.
how to use the tools, if you know how to use your resources, if you
Mhm.
know exactly who you're speaking to,
Exactly.
you can move
Yeah,
mountains.
exactly. And one thing I've been sharing with people that I've recently figured out, like when you're writing for other people, they say write for your audience. I
Mm,
say no, don't do
mm,
that.
mm,
Write for your editor.
mm. Okay,
You want
yeah.
to please the editor. You want to make that editor's life as simple as it can be because
Yeah.
they will remember you fondly. Make your deadlines. Be the best at what you can do. When they want rewrites, just say yes, sir, yes, ma'am, and have at it.
Yeah.
And if you have a line in the sand, defend it, with all your heart, but don't make everything a hill to die on. And the work will eventually come your way because these guys and gals talk to each other. Hey,
Yeah. I
Brian,
love that.
he's not as big a jerk as he tells you he is.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because I did spread.
My
Go ahead.
litmus test that I tell for editors is like,
Uh-huh.
is your editor going to recommend your book to their friends?
Yes. Yes.
That's what you want.
Exactly. That's beautiful. I love that. But yeah, I figure it's the editor's job to figure out what the reader wants.
Mm.
But my job is to figure out what the editor wants.
Hmm.
And then he'll or she will guide me to that point where it's good for to pass on. So
Yeah, yeah. The more people you can have on your team that is going to recommend your book to their friends, the better
for
off
sure.
you're going to be.
Oh yeah, yeah. And it's like building. They say build your tribe, find your
Hmm.
people, and I have the best people in the world, most of whom I've met in the last 12 years, and it grows all the time. I'm glad to say because there's a lot of people out there who are also treating their writing like a business, and I'm
Yeah,
not denigrating anyone who wants this for ego reasons. We all have
sure.
that, or
Yeah,
somebody who just wants to um, do it for fun, do it as a hobby.
yeah.
Perfectly fine. But if you want to make this a self-sustaining thing, then I feel you have to treat it as seriously as you would any job.
Hmm.
That means you show up. That means
Yeah,
you get the job done, and that means that you clean the women's restroom.
yeah.
So,
Well, if you had to sum up everything that we've talked about, all of your life experiences, your career experiences, what do you think would be helpful to our audience?
commit to starting something and commit to finishing it,
Mm.
even if it's rotten
Yeah, even if it's
and
bad.
even if it's bad. And then as you go, remember you are a student and
Mm.
you become an information sponge and you learn what's out there. Um, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to approach people who may be higher on the food chain than you are,
Yeah.
because there are a lot of so many. I will say I've only met one writer in the last 12 years who guarded writing secrets like they were, you know, guarding like the elixir to life
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
thing. Everyone else will be like me. You ask them a question like, "What's the time?" I will give you the history of clockmaking. Uh, and also, I'm going to give you some. This is something I do at shows. I'm going to make sure we're alone. There is a secret site that I can recommend that has all the information everyone wants. Okay, I'll spell it out for you. You may want to get your pens and paper, people. Okay, get ready. Okay, ready? I'll spell it. GOOGLE. I did this at a show one time. I got to the second G, and this woman's like writing it down, and I don't think we're just going to apologize to her. But seriously, Google is your best resource. So is YouTube.
Yeah.
That there are people there who are doing what you want to do.
Yep.
And make sure that the source make sure they are doing what you want them to do, because there's a lot of experts in this field, and there's a lot of black hat players.
Yep.
You've really got to defend yourself against them, but ask the questions, and as you go, be open to more information, be open to changing yourself, and start thinking of yourself as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
And that you are part of a glorious tradition of storytellers, of information givers.
Mm-hmm.
And it is nothing to be ashamed of. It is something you should be proud of. As the book I mentioned earlier by J. Michael Straczynski, I think ought to be in everyone's library. He has a line about the Third Reich, and I'll paraphrase it because I can't get it exactly right. The Third Reich lies in the dustbin of history, backed by the greatest military organization ever known. But the quiet words of Anne Frank persist.
Mm.
And if that hits you in the ventricles, you're
Yeah,
right. Congratulations, welcome to the club.
I got chills from that one. I might have to cry over that one.
Oh, I ugly cried the first time I read that thing. It's an amazing book. It's an amazing book.
Schedule in cry session after podcast is over.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah,
so that's my thing, and don't give up. Never give up.
Yeah, I always say fill the sketchbook,
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's a hard concept for writers, especially to grasp compared to visual artists, because visual artists are used to sketching, they're used to playing around, they're used to experimenting with media and paint and whatever.
Right.
But writers, they feel like every word has to be perfect when it gets written down. And I'm like, no, fill the sketchbook. Make it bad. We're just doing word salad right now. It's okay.
Yes, exactly. And that's, there's a reason Stephen King thanks his editors.
Yeah.
Find a great sympathetic editor who doesn't give a damn about your feelings. And because that's the person you want, who will criticize the writing and not the writer.
Yeah.
And if you get the right one, they'll also tell you, here's something you need to fix. Here's my suggestion on how to do it.
Yeah.
To give you something, a little springboard for it. So there are so many resources for writers. Although we do a lot of this on our own, we don't have to be totally alone in doing it. There's a lot of moving parts to this, but there's also help for every bit of it. And watching shows like this will help all y'all in getting closer to your goals. All right.
Yeah, it's juicy stuff. I mean, way to set up the segue for me. This is powerful stuff that we're talking about, audience. And we definitely encourage you to share your own thoughts and feelings and insights and stories with us as well. We'd love to know how strategies, experiences like these have impacted you in your own writing careers. And please do let us know if you have any questions about anything that we've talked about today. We'd be happy to answer them. If we've said a word that you're like looking it up in the dictionary, have no idea how it was used, why it was used, where it was used, hit us up. We'll enlighten you. And special thanks to Brian for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a delight, Claire. Thank you very much. I appreciate you inviting me.
Yeah, this has been a great conversation. And please comment, like, subscribe below. Check out Linktree/Claire Joins for all of my links. And then where can folks find out more about you?
Oh, basically at risingtide.pub. That's my website. We're going to do a little overhaul soon. But I'm also on Facebook. I have a Rising Tide page on Facebook. Also on TikTok, where every now and then, aside from the reaction videos, give you a little bit of information you can use. And just generally look for Brian K. Morris. I'm all around the place. I am omnipresent, practically. practically.
I mean, that's what we want, right? And I'll
Exactly.
make sure those links are available in the description for easy access. And until next time, please remember that you all have extraordinary stories to share, and we're rooting for you as you use them to change the world for the better. Take care, everyone.